Emily Jenkins moved for her kids' future, but the school board, led by Mr. Holloway, blocked their enrollment under the guise of policy. When their true discriminatory motives came to light, Emily fought back with a shocking twist that changed everything. Justice didn't just win, it made history. Emily Jenkins, a 32-year-old single mother of two, had always dreamed of providing the best possible opportunities for her children. After years of struggling to make ends meet in a bustling, crime-ridden city, she finally saved enough to move to a small, picturesque town in Ohio. The town boasted tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and, most importantly, a school district renowned for its exceptional academic programs and its emphasis on inclusivity and personal growth. For Emily, this move wasn't just about a change of scenery. It was a promise to her children, Jaden, 10, and Sophie, 8, that they would have a chance at a brighter future. Jaden had always shown a knack for science and dreamed of becoming an astronaut, while Sophie loved art and could spend hours sketching the world around her. Emily believed that this school, with its advanced STEM curriculum and vibrant arts program, was the perfect place for them to thrive. But the excitement of a fresh start quickly faded into frustration. When Emily walked into the school's administrative office, arms full of paperwork, she was greeted with forced smiles and cold politeness. After reviewing her documents, the receptionist frowned and said, "I'm sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your address. We can't complete your registration until this is resolved." Confused, Emily replied, "There's no mistake. I've just moved to Maplewood Avenue. It's well within the school district." The receptionist avoided her gaze, shuffling the papers nervously. "It might take a while to process. Maybe try again in a week." Emily left the office puzzled, but not yet discouraged. However, as the days turned into weeks, the obstacles multiplied. Every time she submitted additional documents or clarified her address, she was met with vague excuses and delays. The principal, Mr. Harris, was polite but distant, repeatedly citing policy reviews and procedural hurdles. Emily's patience wore thin when a letter arrived from the school district. It tersely stated that her children could not be enrolled because her residency did not meet the requirements. Furious, she marched back to the school, clutching a copy of her signed lease and utility bills as proof. This time, she was met by the school district's superintendent, Mr. Holloway, a middle-aged man with a firm handshake and a calculated smile. He listened to her concerns but seemed uninterested. When Emily demanded answers, his tone grew colder. "Mrs. Jenkins," he began, leaning back in his chair, "we have strict standards to maintain in this district. We can't bend the rules for every family that moves here." The words hit Emily like a slap. He hadn't outright accused her of lying, but the implication was clear. Her family didn't belong. There was no mention of race or socioeconomic status, but the undertones were unmistakable. She'd heard the whispers from a few of her new neighbors, how the town was changing, how certain people were moving in who didn't share the same values. Emily left the office that day seething with anger. She knew her documents were in order, and she knew her children deserved a fair shot. Yet, the thinly veiled discrimination of the school board was impossible to ignore. It wasn't about policy or paperwork. It was about something deeper, uglier, a desire to maintain an unspoken exclusivity in the community. As she walked back to her car, holding back tears, her son Jaden looked up at her and asked, "Why don't they want us to go to the school, Mom? Did we do something wrong?" Emily clenched her fists, her voice trembling as she replied, "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. This is about them, not us, and we're going to fight this." In that moment, Emily resolved that she wouldn't let the systemic barriers of a biased board define her children's future. Little did she know, her battle was only beginning. Emily felt a crushing wave of humiliation and rejection settle over her as the reality of the situation sank in. She had uprooted her life, moved her family to a new town, and pinned all her hopes on this supposed beacon of opportunity. Yet, here she was, stonewalled by bureaucracy and subtle prejudice. The quiet hostility of the school district made her feel small, like an outsider in a place she desperately wanted to call home. The hardest part, however, was facing her children. Jaden, her 10-year-old son with an infectious smile and an unyielding passion for football, had been ecstatic about joining the school's team. Every night before bed, he would run through plays he'd memorized from YouTube videos, dreaming of donning the team's jersey. Now, that dream seemed shattered. One evening, as Emily tucked him into bed, Jaden broke down. His voice was choked with tears as he asked, "Why don't they want us, Mom? Did I do something wrong?" Emily's heart twisted in pain. "No, sweetheart," she said, stroking his hair. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that aren't fair." But her reassurance didn't stop the nightly tears. Jaden, who was usually so confident, started withdrawing. He avoided playing football outside as though his dream wasn't worth the effort anymore. Sophie, her 8-year-old daughter, was no less affected. Sophie had always been shy, but the promise of making new friends at school had excited her. Now, she clung to Emily's leg every time they went out, whispering, "What if no one ever wants to be my friend?" She began spending hours drawing alone in her room, filling page after page with pictures of happy children playing together, images of a life she felt was slipping away. Emily tried everything she could think of to fix the situation. She wrote letters to the school board, sent emails, and even showed up unannounced at the district office, armed with all the documentation they claimed was missing. Each time, she was met with cold indifference and vague promises to review her case. It became clear that no one was interested in helping her. Whispers of support came from a few local parents who expressed sympathy for Emily's plight, but were careful not to speak too loudly. "The board's been like this for years," one mother confided after pulling Emily aside in the grocery store. "They have their own way of deciding who gets in and who doesn't. Most of us just stay quiet. It's not worth stirring the pot." Emily understood their fear. The town's social hierarchy was tightly woven into the school district. Families who dared to challenge the board often found themselves ostracized, their children excluded from events or opportunities. No one wanted to jeopardize their place in the town's unspoken pecking order. Yet, the more Emily learned, the more determined she became. This wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about a system that had been allowed to operate unchecked, harming those who didn't fit the narrow mold of what the district deemed acceptable. The injustice lit a fire in her, a spark she hadn't felt since she was a teenager listening to her father's lectures about standing up for what was right. Her father, a retired steel worker who had marched in labor protests during his younger days, had always been her moral compass. He used to tell her, "Emily, when someone treats you unfairly, you've got two choices. You can lie down and take it, or you can stand up and fight." That night, sitting at her kitchen table with tears streaming down her face, Emily felt her father's voice echo in her mind. She looked at the pile of rejection letters and legal notices in front of her. Her kids deserved better than this. They deserved to know that their mother wouldn't let anyone tell them they weren't good enough. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and picked up the phone. If the school district wanted to make her fight, she would, but they had no idea just how far she was willing to go. Emily knew she couldn't win this fight alone, so she turned to Eric McCall, a well-known civil rights attorney. Eric, with his reputation for tackling cases of discrimination, immediately recognized the gravity of her situation. As he reviewed Emily's documents and listened to her story, his expression shifted from calm to determined. "What they're doing isn't just unfair, it's illegal," he told her. "If you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you every step of the way." With Eric's guidance, a lawsuit was filed against the school district, accusing them of discriminatory practices. The case quickly attracted media attention, transforming Emily's personal struggle into a public battle for justice. Reporters began investigating the district, uncovering whispers of families who'd faced similar roadblocks. Slowly, patterns of exclusion emerged, often targeting families who didn't fit the district's unspoken standards. Emily's courage struck a chord. Parents who had previously stayed silent began speaking out, sharing stories of rejection and quiet discrimination. One father recounted how his son had been denied enrollment despite living just a block from the school. Another mother revealed that her family had been asked to submit additional documentation multiple times, only to be turned away without explanation. The town buzzed with outrage as Emily became a symbol of resilience. "This isn't just about my children," she told reporters. "It's about every family that's been unfairly judged or excluded." Under growing scrutiny, the school board scrambled to defend itself. At a tense public meeting, Mr. Holloway, the board's senior member, dismissed the accusations as baseless. "We're simply following administrative procedures," he stated, his tone unwavering. "Our policies ensure the district maintains its integrity and high standards." But Eric McCall came prepared. In court, he presented evidence that revealed the true intentions behind the board's decisions. Subpoenaed internal emails painted a damning picture. One email, sent by Holloway, read, "We need to protect the district's reputation. Letting the wrong families in could jeopardize everything we've built." Another message stated outright, "Certain applicants bring too many risks. We have to be selective." As Eric read the emails aloud, the courtroom fell silent. Then a ripple of shock spread through the audience, followed by hushed murmurs. The evidence was clear. The board wasn't enforcing policy. They were enforcing prejudice. Emily's heart pounded as she looked around the courtroom. Parents, reporters, and even teachers stared at the board members with disbelief and anger. Holloway sat stiffly, his once confident demeanor replaced with discomfort. The district's defenses quickly unraveled under the weight of the evidence. By the time the hearing concluded, it was clear that their practices were not only discriminatory, but also unethical. Emily's case had become a watershed moment, exposing the deep flaws within the system. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt hope. Not just for her own children, but for every family the board had quietly turned away. She had fought for justice, and now the truth was impossible to ignore. The courtroom was silent as Judge Walker read his ruling. His stern expression betrayed the gravity of his words. "This case is a reminder that schools are meant to include, not exclude. The actions of the school board were discriminatory, unjust, and illegal. I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Emily Jenkins." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Judge Walker continued, "The Maplewood School Board is hereby found guilty of discriminatory practices. They are ordered to issue a public apology to Mrs. Jenkins and her children. Additionally, mandatory inclusivity training will be required for all district administrators to ensure this never happens again." The words hit the room like a tidal wave. Emily clutched the hands of her children, Jaden and Sophie, tears streaming down her face. After weeks of fighting an uphill battle, the truth had finally been revealed, and justice had prevailed. The following week, the school board convened a public meeting in the same courthouse. It was packed. Parents, reporters, and community members filled every seat. At the center stood Mr. Holloway, the once composed school board chair, now looking pale and uneasy. Stepping forward, he unfolded a piece of paper, his hands visibly trembling. His voice cracked as he began. "On behalf of the Maplewood School District, I would like to issue a formal apology to Mrs. Emily Jenkins and her children. We deeply regret the decisions that led to their exclusion and the harm caused to their family. We failed to uphold the values of fairness and inclusion, and for that, we are truly sorry." The audience was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Holloway hesitated for a moment, then breaking from the prepared statement, looked directly at Emily. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, his voice softer now, "I was wrong. We were wrong. I offer my sincerest apologies to you and your children. We failed you, and I take full responsibility." Emily's chest tightened as tears welled in her eyes. This was the moment she had fought for, not revenge, but acknowledgement. She nodded, her strength unwavering. Applause erupted in the room, growing louder until it became a standing ovation. For Emily, the most emotional moment came days later when Jaden and Sophie received their school ID cards. Jaden's eyes lit up as he held his, grinning ear to ear. "Mom, I'm trying out for the football team," he exclaimed, his excitement and hope returning for the first time in weeks. Sophie hugged her card tightly, already imagining her new friends in art classes. Emily watched them, her heart full. This fight had never just been about paperwork or policies. It was about their future and their right to belong. But her victory didn't end with her family. Her case sparked a wave of change throughout Maplewood. Parents who had once stayed silent now began voicing their concerns, demanding transparency and fairness from the school district. The board, under immense pressure, announced sweeping reforms. Inclusivity training was implemented, a new admissions process was developed, and an external committee was established to oversee fairness. The culture of exclusion that had quietly ruled the district for years began to crumble. Emilia's story didn't just impact Maplewood. Her fight was covered in regional and national media, inspiring families across the country to stand up against similar injustices. Letters poured in from parents, thanking her for her bravery, and social media buzzed with messages of support. Her father's words echoed in her mind as she reflected on the journey. When someone treats you unfairly, you either accept it or fight. Emily had chosen to fight, and her victory was a reminder that even one person's courage could spark meaningful change. For her children, and for the countless others her story had inspired, Emily proved that justice, though often hard-won, was always worth fighting for,